Today we are opening the door to one of the most closed and at the same time the most humane worlds, the world of psychotherapy. Here are practicing psychotherapists who decided to share their real stories from the office. These are not educational cases or fictional plots. These are lively meetings, difficult moments, unexpected turns, and those rare moments when something important changes forever in the silence of a session. Let's go. Just a reminder to do a little online checkup of publicly available information regularly. I used to be more diligent when I worked with higher-risk clients who had histories of violence, burglary, property crimes, but I admittedly got a little complacent since moving to a private practice group. I semi-recently had a former residential client show up to my house while I was doing yard. They told me that another former client of mine who was still at the residence, who had a history of trying to find out personal things about me, found my information online and told all the residents where I live. A few nights later, I had the window of my car smashed, things stolen from it, and then at one point had someone try and enter my home, only to get scared off by my dogs. While it could be unrelated, this would track with my client's past behaviors, even though we had good therapeutic relationships. I did some Googling of myself and found that with minimal work, clients can find my 1. Address, 2. Spouse's name, profession, and workplace, along with pictures of them. 3. Information on close family who are more in the public eye. 4. Info about my non-mental health side job. 1 year ago, you couldn't find any of this information online readily, and I was shocked at how much is now out in the open. I'm working on finding out how to get some of this hidden, specifically my address. But it was a good reminder to do regular Google checkups. Regardless of what setting we work in, we know there will be clients putting those Google hours in. Fair warning, this is a lot of privileged white person feeling struggles. I absolutely get it if people don't feel like engaging. If people do comment, I really ask that you don't send a ton of judgment or shame my way. I am unpacking some gross stuff here in the efforts not to let it fester and worsen. I am dealing with this as best as I can manage. Throwaway account for this one because, whoo boy, this is something that feels very scary to talk about. I am trying to work up the courage to talk about it in supervision, but I am feeling really trepidatious about admitting to my boss and or coworkers, hey, I am feeling extra racist and transphobic lately. I have been noticing myself get frustrated in session with some of my more marginalized clients lately. Edit, about the past 2 weeks. This is not my baseline. This is new. It weirdly feels like the more legitimate the complaint, or the more extreme the marginalization, the more the resentment shows up for me. I think it has to do with the depth of pain, suffering, or hopelessness I am being asked to bear witness to. You know, the things people want to see a therapist for, the things that are my literal job to do. Also, the things that the people actually in these communities witness on the regular and don't get to opt out of seeing. It isn't necessarily showing up in the same way for people who are going through personal struggles that aren't systemic. The same thing doesn't show up for someone grieving a death of a beloved grandparent as it does for someone dealing with poverty and discrimination. I think this is because I feel like the grief is something we can process and move through eventually, whereas we can't do anything about the systemic shit. This might also be because even though I am way more privileged and generally safer than a lot of my clients are, I am still living in the US, where shit is unstable for most people right now, and I definitely have my own stress about a lot of systemic threats. This has all been internal. I have not noticed any change in my tone or anything else that would communicate that frustration to the client. On the other hand, as we know, humans can be very good at picking up on vibes, and so there is some nervousness about a client picking up on it anyway. Additionally, this has all been emotional. On the intellectual side, I still hold all of the same progressive beliefs I have held for years. I still have the same understanding of systemic oppression, etc. When the more prejudiced thoughts come up, I am doing my best to treat them like other types of intrusive thoughts I have dealt with. I recognize it. I name it to myself as a thought my brain as having, but not as something I believe, and I refocus on the present moment. The frequency and intensity of them are way more than normal lately, and I am trying to figure out what to do to resolve that. On the one hand, I do think this is compassion fatigue related, which means I need to do more self-care, be gentle with myself, seek support, etc. I was reading up the other day on managing implicit bias, and one of the things that people mention is that the more stressed you are, the more likely for bias to impact your actions. On the flip side, this looks a lot like some white fragility bullshit, which means I need to hold my discomfort, do more work, read more books, expose myself to more, improve my distress tolerance, etc. I'm trying to balance being compassionate with myself while also holding myself accountable, along with the practical sense of, hey, what will be most effective at dealing with this? I would love to hear if anyone else has experienced this or thoughts on what to do. Edit 1. I mentioned racism and transphobia here as examples, but this is also showing up in most of the other prejudice-isms, including ableism and classism. I also mentioned my own whiteness here as sort of a shorthand for a lot of cultural positions. You know? All of these are tied together. Whiteness as shorthand for power and systems of oppression, etc. Edit 2. Thank you so much for everyone who has responded. Getting so many different perspectives has been really helpful in terms of clarifying what is going on. I'm going to copy and paste part of what I wrote in response to Infinite Victory 187's very insightful comment about potentially feeling envy for some of these clients, in case folks are curious about some of the conclusions. I think you are onto something about the envy. I have been really longing to be taken care of lately. Not to think there is something about, well, if my pain or fear is not the biggest or most pressing, nobody is going to take care of me. That combines with some weird countertransference of, well, if I save you and nothing in your support system, if you have one, will save you, and you can't save yourself, that means I am incapable of saving people, including myself. And also, nobody can or will save me, which means I will never be safe. And so the resentment comes less from them making me feel guilty and more from me having to face my own vulnerability and sense of unsafety, as well as my powerlessness. Fun. Also, I think some of this might be less, this is only happening with my marginalized clients, than it is, I have like 3 financially secure straight white men on my caseload, and all of my other clients are marginalized to varying degrees. I think the countertransference just shows up harder in proportion to the degree to which that marginalization negatively impacts the client's personal safety or access to resources. Who worked through some stuff there? Or, at the least, analyzed and intellectualized some stuff. Emotionally processing it, that is going to be a different story. I'm a school-based mental health clinician operating under a coordinator who is on site and a RD who is off-site. My coordinator's background is adults and end-of-life care, short-term therapeutic, and my background is adolescents and young adults. I am at a loss with myself, my coordinator, and this program. I used to think I was doing the best I could therapeutically in this school, but now I'm starting to feel like all therapeutic guidelines, like basic empathy, is out the window. My coordinator wants things a certain way. We are a Tier 3 level program that sees high-risk kids, but when a student shows any signs of high risk, even if it's passive, no intent or plan, they are sent out. They're a brand new kid coming to us for school avoidance and they're avoiding school. They're sent out to the hospital for screening. We pushed kids who really struggle with anxiety into a pep rally without Eve explaining to them the importance of exposure or what anxiety does to the brain and why they feel that way. It feels like it goes against so much of what I know as a therapist, pushing clients to do things they aren't ready to do, all in the name of, well, this is life. There are moments where I feel that way too, especially being in a school. There are just things that have to happen, like attending classes, but my coordinator expects to throw them into classes first day in our program, and if they don't attend, they're getting screened for HLOC. At this point, I just don't know what's right and wrong anymore. I had to pull my students into the auditorium of an insanely busy pep rally where she was sitting right next to the band playing very loud music. It just doesn't seem right to me, and when I show those students any amount of empathy after one of them ran out crying, I'm pulled away to let them cope on their own. Is that the right thing to do? Am I coddling these kids or giving them too much of my energy? Should I be pushing them more, regardless of if they're ready, or if it'll trigger them just because this is the real world and we can't avoid these things? Am I doing them more harm than good when I rescue them, as my coordinator calls it? I'm not sure if any of this makes sense or if there's even advice to give. It's a very layered situation with much more history between me and my coordinator, so I'm happy to give more examples. All in all, I feel like my therapeutic competency is being questioned, and I don't know where to go from here. To be honest, the most tough for me was this 165-year-old woman, presented with psychosis, detained, just couldn't survive outside, had been shitting in the bathtub, had a fire in a 44-gallon drum in her house to keep warm, cause utilities had been shut off, which destroyed the house due to smoke damage, etc. Now, 65 is a weird age to present for the first time with schizophrenia. She was weird too. She was really good at hiding the symptoms. Most psychotics have too little connection to reality for that. It really kinda struck me as a long-term thing rather than a new disease. So as part of the workup, we talked to family and whatnot. Turns out she had been a normal kid, till teen years when she became weird. Starting to make sense now, schizophrenia generally comes on around puberty. So I asked the family, big, close family, what happened, why she wasn't treated. They say they didn't know anything was wrong, just thought she was weird. This girl had totally withdrawn from them, ran away from home, got in trouble with police multiple times, often raved about bizarre things. I had a pile of letters a mile long that she had written to the government. She once claimed they owed her royalties because she had the trademark on the phrase, the Australian government, for example. They all knew about them, never once questioned if she might actually be sick rather than just weird. So, I am pretty frustrated. I mean, it isn't really their fault. Our society is just so shit with this stuff. No one wants to consider mental illness. And this family were all stoic Brit stock. I kinda wanna slap some sense into them, but it won't help anyone. Then I get her blood work back. She has burnt out Hashimoto's thyroiditis. 40 years earlier, she had a treatable physical problem that presented with psychiatric symptoms. No one wanted to deal with it. It fried her brain, and she lived the next 40 years as an outcast. The rest of her life was going to be treatment orders and depot injections,